In every age, armies leave behind more than routes and banners, they leave behind rumors. Letters pressed into parchment. And the quiet warmth of love that grows when the world insists on war. Hidden romance secrets of historical armies revealed invite you to listen closely to the soft whispers that travel beside iron boots and drumbeats. It's not a guide to tactics, but a map of hearts, showing how affection survives the hardest days and sometimes blooms in the exact moment when it is least expected. The first secret is the letter that traveled farther than any courier could. In the middle of a siege, when the city walls whispered back the cold truth of danger, a seamstress tucked a secret message into a linen sleeve. She swore the ink would outlive the siege and the inked promise would keep two people tethered across miles. The soldier who found it felt warmth creep into his hands despite the chill of stone and smoke. He carried that note not to boast, but to remind himself that someone believed in him when the ground shook and the night horizon burned red. The letter became a thread in the fabric of daily survival. A reminder that there was a future beyond the front line. The second secret hides in plain sight, between the lines of the battlefield's music. A drummer stood beneath a flag, his sticks tapping a rhythm that sounded like a heartbeat you could lose yourself in. He wore a ring small, unassuming, almost shyly hidden under a fingertip cuff that belonged to a woman who kept a steady vigil in a quiet village. When the marching line went past, he would lift his gaze to the camp's edge, imagining her at a window, counting his steps the same way she counted the days until his return. The ring wasn't a boast or a symbol, it was a tether. A vow spoken in the language of small axe sewn patches, a shared supper, a whispered apology after a rough day. The echo of that rhythm carried more power than a trumpet-esque call because it grounded courage and tenderness. The third secret shows up in the most ordinary, almost laughable place. The supply tent where ration carts rattled like a clumsy orchestra. A nurse and a courier swapped glances above a map spread across a rough wooden table. Between notes about stolen flour and hardtack, they traded sighs and small favors: an extra blanket, a ride on a horse's back, a name scrawled on the corner of a parchment to be folded into a letter later. They learned to speak with smiles that could be seen as well as heard, to convert worry into notes of music that drifted through the canvas walls when the night fell and the camp settled into a slower, warmer tempo. It wasn't love shown in grand gestures, but in the careful choreography of care, patches sewn, stories told softly, hands found again in the twilight. As we listen to these stories, it becomes clear that romance in history didn't wait for a perfect moment. It found people in the middle of imperfect days and offered a different kind of ending, one that didn't erase the danger but softened it. One that didn't erase duty but gave it a gentler gravity. The third secret is resilience dressed as devotion. In letters wrinkled with age, lovers learn to write through fear, to keep promises unbroken even when the letter's ink blurred. They learned to hear the other's voice not through the sound of a voice but through the cadence of words that kept returning, again and again, like a familiar tune. What makes these hidden romances feel so real is how they show love as a steady force rather than a dramatic interruption. There are scenes where a grandmotherly aunt in a reserved town steadies a young recruit with a story of her own long-ago love, reminding him that time moves in both directions, forward and backward, so you can honor the past while choosing the future. There are moments when a captain stops to retrieve a torn photograph tucked inside a boot. The edges frayed but the image bright with a remembered smile. In each moment, romance is not a distraction from war, it is a way to endure it. And then there is the night when the field outside the fortress glowed faintly with lanterns from soldiers' homes across the valley. A couple stood hidden behind a scorched olive tree, leaning toward each other with the world at a standstill. They spoke in careful whispers, trading vows as if the future might vanish in a breath. They spoke of ordinary things, a shared meal, a child's letter that might have been lost, a plan to meet where the river bends near the old mill. The confession was simple but monumental in those hours of quiet. They would not surrender hope to the shelling or the uncertainty of the morrow. They believed in a future where two people could still choose each other, step by step, long after the smoke cleared. The moment felt like not because it changed the war, but because it reminded us that love is a stubborn light that pushes back against night. If you're listening for a pattern, you'll notice how these stories thrive on patience. The slow, unglamorous kind of romance, one that grows through separations, through letters left in pockets, through late-night talks at mess halls, through waiting by a doorway for a chance to say hello again. It's not about dramatic fireworks, it's about choosing to stay and choose again. It's about loyalty that feels almost mundane until you realize it carried the whole day through and kept hope alive for someone else. Someone who needs to believe that happiness isn't a myth invented for the end of a ballad, but a living, breathing possibility you work toward, even on the days your hands tremble. Hidden romances also traveled through the quiet corridors of power. A general's daughter could be found in an attic room, tracing the same map her father traced, tracing destinies as if every marked line could bend toward a chance to see him again. She learned to read between the borders, to sense where a message might be hidden in plain sight. And she practiced the courage of asking for what mattered most: peace, mercy, time, and another chance to live, not just to survive. The romance here isn't loud, it's a quiet act of requesting a future that aligns with kindness. It's the choice to remember a loved one during a campaign, to keep a garden flourishing, to send a letter tucked into a boot heel and hope it finds its way home. Sometimes the secrets lie in the smallest artifacts. A locket pressed inside a cartridge box, a cufflink tucked into a linen shirt, a pair of gloves left under a soldier's cot for someone to discover later. These objects become talismans, tiny reminders that life persists even when the world seems to have paused for violence. They invite us to look again at the everyday, at the way small acts wrap themselves around the day's dull edges and give it a glow. The romance here is not about perfection, it's about courage, consent, and the willingness to risk vulnerability when the stakes are high. I want you to feel these eras not as distant pages of a dusty book, but as a mirror you can recognize. The longing in a soldier's letter, the tremor of a hand smoothing a sleeve as dawn breaks, the shared glance across a crowded mess hall, the unspoken promise that love can outlast a siege. Romance doesn't vanish on the battlefield, it transforms with the times, becoming a beacon for resilience, a reminder that even during the loudest roars, two hearts can tune their rhythm to a gentler, truer drum. So what does all this mean for us today? It means hope has roots that run deeper than convenience or schedules. It means perseverance matters, not as quiet endurance alone but as a choice to keep listening, to keep believing in someone else's story, to keep showing up with tenderness when the world tests you again. It means a happy ending might arrive not as a single dramatic moment but as a mosaic of small, faithful choices that persist through long chapters. If you carry even a part of that belief into your own days, you're practicing the oldest, most human magic: love, steady, stubborn, and true. And if you ever feel that romance is a privilege of a different era, remember the soldiers, the couriers, the nurses, and the lovers who carried hope in their pockets and courage in their voices. They taught us that history isn't only about battles won or lost, but about hearts choosing to stay, to forgive, to grow, and to trust that tomorrow can be kinder. The hidden secrets aren't buried forever. They're tucked into the stories we tell, the memories we share, and the ways we choose to love again, even when the sirens of fear sound loud and close. Because love, like a well-kept fire, warms the feet of those who walk out under a night sky filled with stars and the quiet promise that someday, somehow, happiness can be earned, nurtured, and kept. If this journey through history has felt intimate, that's because it is meant to be. A whisper, a touch of warmth in a weathered glove, a note found in a book in a corner of a ruined library. These are not relics, they are invitations. They invite us to believe that romance is not a retreat from reality but a compass that helps us navigate it with grace. They invite us to see that perseverance, trust, and tenderness can survive even the fiercest storms. And they invite us to dream of a future where brave hearts aren't just remembered for their bravery, but celebrated for their capacity to love well. SFX notes appear gently in the corners of memory. The world outside may still demand steel and strategy, but in these hidden romances you'll hear a softer strategy: to love with courage, to wait with patience, to forgive with gentleness, and to build a life that honors both duty and desire. If you carry one takeaway from these stories, let it be this: love is not a footnote to history. It is its own bright chapter. And it can begin again wherever someone chooses to believe in it, again and again.